Sophia never expected that a simple family gathering would change everything. She had moved to America to build a life of her own, chasing dreams that once seemed far beyond her reach. Independent, ambitious, and determined, she had no time for distractions, especially not the kind that came in the form of Daniel. He was there when she arrived, standing among the relatives she hadn't seen in years. Time had changed him. He wasn't the same boy she used to know, the cousin who once ran through their grandmother's garden with her back in their childhood summers. He was taller, more confident, with a presence that was hard to ignore. When their eyes met, something flickered between them, familiarity, yes, but also something else. Something unspoken. Their conversations started effortlessly, catching up on lost time. Daniel asked about her life in New York, her work, the challenges she faced. He listened in a way that made her feel heard, really heard. Sophia found herself laughing more than she had in months, her usual guarded nature slipping away. Over the next few days, they spent more time together, drawn to each other in ways neither could explain. They stayed up late talking about their dreams, regrets, the things they never told anyone else. There was an ease between them, but also an undercurrent of something deeper, something neither wanted to name. One evening, after a long family dinner, they found themselves outside, alone. The cool night air wrapped around them as they stood on the patio, the city lights flickering in the distance. "You've changed," Daniel said, his voice quieter than before. Sophia smiled, turning to him. "So have you." He hesitated before speaking again. "Do you ever think about how different life would be if we had grown up closer? If things were different?" She felt her heartbeat quicken, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I try not to think about things I can't change." Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair.
"Yeah.
Me too." But in that moment, standing under the stars, both of them knew they were thinking about it. And that was enough to change everything. Sophia told herself it was just a passing thought, a fleeting moment of weakness. But the more she tried to ignore it, the stronger it became. She replayed every conversation, every lingering glance, every time Daniel's hand had accidentally brushed against hers. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. She started avoiding him, keeping conversations brief, always making sure they were surrounded by others. But Daniel noticed. One evening, when the family was gathered around the fireplace, he caught her by the wrist as she tried to walk past him. His grip was gentle, but firm enough to make her stop. "Are you avoiding me?" he asked, searching her face. She forced a laugh. "Don't be ridiculous, Sophia." His voice was quiet, serious. "Talk to me." But she couldn't, because if she did, she would have to admit the truth, to him, to herself. And admitting it meant acknowledging that what she felt wasn't something she could ignore anymore. The following weekend, a family trip took them out of the city. Long drives, shared meals, stolen moments. The air between them was heavy with everything they weren't saying. One afternoon, while everyone else was inside, Daniel found her sitting alone by the lake, staring at the water as if searching for answers. "You're running," he said, sitting beside her. She didn't deny it. "And you're not." Daniel exhaled sharply. "I've tried. But tell me something. If we weren't cousins, would you still be pushing me away?" The question sent a jolt through her. She turned to him, heart pounding. "That doesn't change reality, but it changes how we feel." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "I know you feel it too." Sophia clenched her hands, trying to steady herself. "It doesn't matter." "It does," he insisted. "Because I don't think I can pretend anymore." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. She wanted to say something, to tell him that she was just as lost, just as terrified. But before she could, voices from inside called their names. The moment shattered, reality forcing its way back in. As she stood to leave, she stole one last glance at him. The pain in his eyes mirrored her own. And that was the moment she knew this wasn't something she could run from forever. Sophia tried to convince herself that time would dull the ache, that if she ignored it long enough, it would disappear. But it didn't. Instead, it grew, pressing against her chest every time she saw Daniel, Every time she caught him looking at her with something between longing and restraint. Then came the news. Her family had found someone for her, an ideal match, they said. A respectable man from a good family. Someone who could offer her stability, a future. The kind of person she was supposed to want. She expected Daniel to say something when he heard. To pull her aside, to fight for her, to tell her that none of it mattered because what they had was real. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled away completely. He stopped seeking her out, stopped holding her gaze across crowded rooms, stopped being the person who made her feel like she was the only one who truly mattered. She told herself it was for the best, that this was how it had to be. But when she saw him one evening, standing by the window with a drink in his hand, staring out at nothing, she couldn't stop herself. "You're really going to pretend like none of this happened?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Daniel turned, his expression unreadable. "What do you want me to say, Sophia?" "I want you to tell me the truth," she said, stepping closer. "I want to know if I was the only one who felt it." He let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "You weren't. Then why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do," he said, his jaw tightening. "Because this, whatever this is, can't happen. You know that." Her hands clenched at her sides. "So, you're just going to let me go?" He looked at her for a long moment, something breaking behind his eyes. "I have to." The words felt like a knife to her chest. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that love wasn't supposed to be dictated by rules, that the heart didn't care about what was right or wrong. But she said nothing, because deep down, she was just as scared as he was. So she did what he couldn't. She turned and walked away. But as she did, she knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. Sophia had always believed that time could heal anything, but weeks passed, and the emptiness remained. She went through the motions, met the man her family had chosen, smiled when expected, but inside, she was numb. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt real. Because the only place she had ever felt alive was in Daniel's presence. One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, staring at the engagement invitation her family had sent out, something inside her snapped. She couldn't do this. She wouldn't. Love wasn't supposed to be a duty, a carefully arranged agreement. It was supposed to be messy, unpredictable, unstoppable. And she knew exactly where her heart belonged. Without hesitation, she grabbed her keys and drove. She didn't know what she was going to say, but she knew she had to see him. When she arrived at his place, she found him outside, leaning against his car, lost in thought. The moment he saw her, something in his expression shifted. Hope, disbelief, something fragile and desperate. "I can't do it," she said, breathless. "I can't marry him. I can't pretend." Daniel exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Sophia." "No," she cut him off. "You don't get to walk away again. You don't get to tell me this isn't real." She took a step closer, her voice shaking. "Because I love you. And I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't care what we're supposed to be. All I know is that I can't live my life without you." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, suddenly, the distance between them disappeared. His hands cupped her face, his forehead resting against hers. "Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting for you to say that?" he whispered. Relief flooded her, and for the first time in weeks, she could breathe. "Then don't let me go." "I won't," he promised. "Not ever again." It wouldn't be easy. They knew there would be questions, judgment, obstacles. But none of it mattered. Because love wasn't about what was easy. It was about what was real. And finally, after all the running, all the fear, they were ready to fight for it. Together.